The first thing that hit me was the video. My daughter's wedding, December 31st fireworks outside, champagne flutes clinking, the whole room aglow and me, invisible, not metaphorically, literally. My name was on the invitation, my presence expected. Yet somehow I had been written out of every frame, every camera angle, every memory. I sat in my small Chicago apartment, the TV flickering like a cruel heartbeat, and my hands shook. At 58, I had spent decades learning to blend in, to be agreeable, to smile when I wanted to scream. But tonight, I felt something inside me tighten like a steel cable. Something refused to bend. Jessica, my daughter, looked radiant, arm in arm with her husband, and the room buzzed with joy that I was barred from sharing. I noticed the subtle things immediately, the way her in-laws subtly shifted when my name was mentioned, the small, polite nods that cut me out before I could speak. Every smile around me felt like a silent verdict. I didn't belong. And honestly, part of me had always expected this, buried in the polite chaos of family gatherings and unspoken rules, but seeing it materialized like this, it was a blow sharper than any I'd imagined. I remembered Robert, my late husband, whispering once over coffee, "Never let anyone underestimate your quiet." He had taught me patience, foresight, and the value of being underestimated. And yet, even with those lessons, the betrayal tasted like dust in my mouth. Jessica had always been ambitious, yes, but I'd thought our bond mother and daughter would shield me from deliberate erasure. I was wrong. Tonight, I was a ghost at my own daughter's wedding. The twist hit me slowly, like a tide rising over time. This wasn't just about me being left out. My daughter's husband and the entire in-law clan had quietly maneuvered to control every detail, every seat, every photo, every toast, ensuring that I would not only be invisible, but irrelevant. Their polite smiles hid a strategic power play, and I had been played as the harmless, sentimental mother no one needed to consider. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the heater low, and let the weight settle. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I didn't act, not yet. I'd learned long ago that a storm reveals its power only when you've prepared for it. And right now, preparation was exactly what I needed. My daughter's husband had underestimated me, just like they always did with women like me. Seasoned, careful, observant. By the time the clock struck midnight and fireworks spilled across the New Year's sky, I had made a decision. This wasn't just a snub, it was a challenge, and I didn't intend to stay invisible. Tomorrow, I would start figuring out how deep this manipulation went, how much of my daughter's life had been curated to keep me at the sidelines. And I knew with a quiet certainty that every slight, every exclusion had left a trail. Money, access, legal standing trails I could follow if I knew where to look. They thought I was forgotten, that they had erased me, but they had just lit the fuse. And by the end of this, no one, not my daughter's husband, not his family, not even Jessica herself, would underestimate me again. Tomorrow, I would uncover the first cracks in their perfect facade, and what I found would shock even me. People love to confuse silence with gratitude. That's the story they told themselves about me. The week after the wedding, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Thank you messages, group chats, smiling photos from the honeymoon. Everyone acting like December 31st had been perfect, like nothing strange had happened, like I hadn't been quietly erased from the biggest day of my daughter's life. I replied with thumbs up emojis and polite sentences. So proud of you. Looks beautiful. Hope you're resting. That silence made them comfortable. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't quiet because I was grateful. I was quiet because I was watching. I started replaying the wedding day in my head, moment by moment, the way you do when something doesn't sit right in your gut. The seating chart they accidentally changed. The way the coordinator kept steering me away from the front row. The speech schedule that somehow ran out of time before it got to me. None of it was random. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. A few days later, I met my daughter for coffee. Just us. No in-laws, no pressure. She smiled too much. Kept checking her phone. I asked her, calmly, why I wasn't in the wedding video. She shrugged. Said the editor focused more on the groom's side. Said it wasn't personal. Said I was being sensitive. Sensitive. That word again. The same one her mother-in-law used, like a weapon wrapped in silk. I looked at my daughter and realized something that hurt worse than the wedding itself. She hadn't defended me because defending me would have made things uncomfortable for her new life. And comfort, apparently, mattered more than truth. On my way home, I remembered something her husband once said to me, half joking, half not. You're old school. You don't really need to be involved in the big stuff anymore. At the time, I laughed it off. Now I understood what he meant. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me irrelevant. That's when I started pulling files, bank statements, property documents, trust drafts I'd never finalize because I didn't want to rock the boat. Boats rock whether you move or not. I finally accepted that. I wasn't broke. I wasn't confused. I wasn't dependent. I owned assets outright. I had businesses that quietly funded half the comforts my daughter now enjoyed. And somehow, everyone had convinced themselves that I was just background noise. I called my attorney. Not emotional, not dramatic, just curious. What happens, I asked, if I change everything? He paused, then said, legally, you're free to. That sentence sat heavy in my chest. Free? That night, I scrolled through social media and saw the honeymoon photos, luxury resorts, champagne sunsets, smiling faces, tagged locations that cost more per night than people assumed I even understood. They were spending money they thought was safe, money they thought was already theirs. And that's when I remembered Ethan, my son-in-law's best friend, the only person who had looked me in the eye at the wedding and treated me like I mattered. He'd whispered, "They don't know who you are." He was right. They didn't know who I was. They thought the quiet woman in the back row would stay there forever. They had no idea that my silence wasn't surrender. It was planning. By the time they realized I wasn't confused, I was restructuring everything. It would already be too late. There's a specific kind of arrogance people get when they think you're harmless. It makes them sloppy. I started with the boring stuff, the stuff no one ever thinks a sentimental mom will touch. Deeds, operating agreements, old emails buried so deep no one remembered sending them. I didn't rush. Rushing is how you miss fingerprints. The more I read, the clearer it got. My daughter's husband didn't build his business from scratch like he loved to say at dinner parties. It was propped up. Quiet loans, personal guarantees tied to properties in my name, deferred repayments labelled as family support. Like that made them disappear. I remembered every check I'd written, every temporary favour, every time I was told, "We'll fix this later." Later had arrived. What stunned me wasn't the dependence. Families help each other. I get that. What stunned me was the assumption. The way they talked about assets connected to me as if they were already theirs. As if my role in the story had ended the moment my daughter said, "I do." I met with my attorney again. This time, I brought a folder. He flipped through it slowly. Then he looked up and said, "They've been counting on you not paying attention." I smiled. They were right. Until they weren't. That's when he explained my options. Not hypotheticals. Real moves. Trusts, asset protection, legal firewalls that didn't touch my daughter's safety but stripped everyone else of leverage. Power doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it's a signature in the right place. I didn't confront anyone. Not my daughter, not her husband, definitely not his parents. Confrontation gives people time to prepare. I wasn't interested in fair warning. Instead, I drafted a charitable trust. Clean, boring, untouchable. My assets would move into it gradually. The income would still support my daughter, education, housing, healthcare, but control that would never touch my son-in-law's hands. Ever. As the paperwork moved forward, something unexpected happened. I felt calm, not vengeful, not shaky, just steady, like I'd finally stepped back into my own body after years of shrinking myself to fit other people's comfort. Then my daughter called. She sounded distracted, asked if everything was okay, said her husband was stressed about cash flow timing, asked if I could delay any changes I was making. Changes, so they knew, or at least felt the ground shifting. I told her I was just organizing things. That line used to work on me when people said it. Funny how language changes when you understand what it's hiding. She hesitated, then said, "You trust us, right?" I closed my eyes. Trust isn't about words. It's about behavior. And their behavior had been clear since December 31st. "I trust myself," I said. The silence on the other end of the phone was loud. That night, I poured a glass of wine and reread the wedding program. I noticed something I hadn't before. A list of special thanks. Their names were everywhere. Mine wasn't there at all. That was fine. They didn't need to thank me. They just needed to understand that the woman they erased from the wedding hadn't disappeared. She had repositioned. They thought the paperwork was routine until one meeting made it painfully clear who actually held the power. The meeting invite came disguised as concern. "Just family stuff," my son-in-law said on the phone. "Nothing serious. We just want to talk." That's how people talk when they already know something's wrong but don't know how bad it is yet. We met at their place on a Sunday afternoon. Big house, open floor plan, everything white and neutral, like no one wanted to leave fingerprints behind. His parents were already there when I arrived, sitting too straight on the couch, coffee untouched. My daughter hugged me. It felt careful. I took a seat and waited. I've learned that the person who speaks first usually gives away the most. My son-in-law cleared his throat. started talking about gratitude, about family unity, about how misunderstandings happen during weddings. Then his mother jumped in, smiling. "We hope you didn't feel overlooked. You know how chaotic events can be. Overlooked." They loved that word. It made disrespect sound accidental. I nodded. "Let them keep talking. People reveal their strategy when they think you're already cornered." Finally, he said it. "We heard you're moving some things around, legally, and we just wanted to make sure it won't affect the family." The family? Interesting how that word always showed up when money was involved. I asked a simple question. "What exactly do you think is being affected?" Silence. They exchanged looks. His father spoke up this time. "Well, we've made plans, long-term plans, based on certain expectations." Expectations. I almost laughed. I leaned back and folded my hands in my lap. "Expectations should be written down," I said calmly. "Otherwise, they're just assumptions." That's when my daughter finally looked at me. Really looked. I saw fear there. Not for me, for her comfort. She asked, softly, "Mom, you wouldn't do anything to hurt us, right?" There it was. Emotional leverage. Clean, precise. I took a breath. "I won't hurt you," I said, "but I won't be managed either." My son-in-law stiffened. His smile cracked just a little. "No one's managing you." I met his eyes. "Then this conversation wouldn't be happening." That's when Ethan spoke. He'd been standing near the kitchen island the whole time, quiet, watching, the same way I'd watched at the wedding. "You all keep talking like she owes you something," he said. Calm, direct. "But none of this exists without her." The room froze. My son-in-law snapped. "This isn't your place." Ethan shrugged. "Funny, that's what you told her at the wedding." My daughter gasped. Her head turned sharply toward her husband. "The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs the right moment." I stood up. "I didn't come here to argue," I said. "I came to inform you." Their faces tightened. "I'm organizing my estate. My assets are being protected. My daughter will be taken care of. That's non-negotiable." His mother's voice trembled. "And us?" I smiled politely. "You were never part of the plan." No yelling, no threats, just a boundary they couldn't cross. As I walked toward the door, my son-in-law followed me, his voice low and sharp. "You're making a mistake." I turned back once. "No," I said. "I corrected one. When I left, I didn't feel victorious. I felt light. Because now they knew. And once people realize you're not bluffing, the game changes fast. What they didn't know yet was that the documents were already finalized and the next call would expose just how trapped they were. The call came 3 days later. Not from my daughter, from their lawyer. That alone told me everything I needed to know. He introduced himself politely, like we were equals stepping into a neutral conversation. Asked if I had a moment to clarify some recent estate activity. I told him I had plenty of time. He started slow, mentioned restructurings, asked about intent, used phrases like unintended consequences and family exposure. Lawyers love soft words when the ground is giving way under their feet. Then I said the sentence that changed his tone. The charitable trust is already active. Silence, not the awkward kind, the calculating kind. He recovered quickly. "I see. And is your daughter aware of the full scope of this?" "She'll be protected for life," I said. That's the full scope that matters. He cleared his throat. You do understand this limits her husband's operational flexibility. I smiled to myself. There it was. The truth finally slipped out. That's the point, I said. The call ended politely, but politeness is what people use when they've lost leverage. That night, my daughter showed up at my door unannounced. Her eyes were red. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not weak, just shaken, like someone who'd realized the floor they were standing on wasn't solid. She sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I taught her math homework and signed her college forms. They're panicking, she said quietly. Everything's tied together. The business, the loans, the projections. I poured her tea. Let her talk. They keep saying you're punishing them, she continued, that you're embarrassed and trying to get back at everyone. I finally sat down across from her. Do you believe that? She hesitated. That hesitation told me the truth. I didn't know, she said, about the wedding, about how they treated you. I thought keeping the peace meant staying quiet. I nodded. That's what they count on. Silence dressed up as maturity. She swallowed hard. Ethan told me what he saw, what they said, what you went through. Ethan? I said nothing. Let his name sit between us. I'm not choosing sides, she rushed. I didn't realize how much you were carrying. I reached across the table and took her hand. I carried it so you wouldn't have to. Her shoulders shook. For the first time since December 31st, she cried like my daughter again, not like someone's wife, not like someone's asset. Just my kid. Later that night, my son-in-law texted me. One sentence. We need to talk. This affects everyone. I didn't respond. Because when people say everyone, they usually mean themselves. The next morning, I received notice that their bank had frozen a credit extension pending clarification of ownership structures. Then another email. Then another. What they thought was a simple family dynamic had turned into a legal maze with no exit signs. I wasn't angry. I was finished explaining. The woman they erased from the wedding had just rewritten the entire future without raising her voice once. But the real reckoning didn't come from lawyers or banks. It came when my daughter finally had to choose what kind of life she wanted to stand in. My daughter came back a week later. Not crying this time, not defensive, just clear. She didn't bring her husband. That told me more than anything she could have said. We sat on the porch because the house felt too small for what needed to be said. Winter sun, sharp and honest, the kind that doesn't flatter, just reveals. She took a breath. I didn't lose you, she said. I almost did. I let that land. She told me about the fights, about how fast love turns ugly when control slips, about how the wedding wasn't just a day, it was a preview, a rehearsal for a life where her silence was expected and mine was inconvenient. They said you were dramatic, she admitted. Too emotional, hard to manage. I laughed. Not bitter, just amazed. That's what people say when they don't benefit from your obedience anymore. She nodded slowly. I don't want to build a life where the strongest woman I know has to shrink so I can belong. That was the moment. Not the lawyers, not the trust, not the frozen accounts. That, she told him she wanted space. Told his parents they no longer spoke for her, told them the money wasn't theirs to plan around anymore. And when they tried to scare her, because that's always the last move, she didn't fold. Because she finally understood something I learned way too late in life. Respect shows up when access disappears. Weeks passed. The business restructured. Smaller, cleaner, honest. My daughter went back to school part-time, moved into a place that was hers. Quiet, modest, free. People stopped calling me difficult. They started calling me prepared. Funny how that works. One afternoon, Ethan stopped by. He didn't make a big deal of it. Just handed me a coffee and said, "You know, you changed the whole game without ever embarrassing anyone." I smiled. "I wasn't trying to win." "I know," he said. "That's why you did." On December 31st, a year later, my daughter and I cooked dinner together. No guests, no cameras, no pretending. At midnight, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for not saving me the easy way." That's when I realized something important. I didn't do this to punish anyone. I did it to stop teaching my daughter that love requires erasing yourself. I'm 58 years old. I don't need a spotlight. I don't need an apology tour. I don't need to be included in places where my presence is tolerated instead of honored. They thought my silence meant I had nothing left to say. What it really meant was that I was choosing my words carefully. And when I finally spoke through paper, through law, through boundaries, the world listened. Not because I demanded it, but because I finally stopped asking.